The sales robots have taken over, and they're decimating deals left and right, destroying them right in their tracks. On the AI for Sales podcast, our mission is to empower everyday sellers to embrace AI superpowers to build new bridges and crush quota. Dr. Joel Abon said it best in the AI for Sales book. In sales, time kills deals. In AI for Sales, AI kills time. Join our hosts as we learn from the C-suite of the world's fastest growing companies about how you can leverage AI today to transform your sales revenue engine while being the best version of you.
Hey everybody, this is Joe Papa, founder and CEO of Truversity and your host for today's episode of AI for Sales podcast. Today, we have Jeff Wang. It's very exciting to have Jeff on the show today. He is the head of business and sales at Codeium, and he's a co-founder. He's got experience in building apps and ops and companies. He's an angel investor in multiple unicorns from seed round to crypto, AI enthusiast. It's so exciting to have you on the show today, Jeff.
Hey, yeah. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's start off where did it all begin? Like, what were you absolutely obsessed with when you were growing up as a kid?
I definitely have a very unique kind of childhood. I think I grew up like loving movies and making videos. I think my dad saw this as like not a very profitable route of growing up to being an adult. So he was trying to push me towards like investing in engineering. So basically my childhood was like mainly me making a lot of videos and then my dad trying to force me to learn about the stock market, essentially.
Awesome. And how did that play out in your childhood?
You know, it's funny. I made a lot of, number one is like during that time, making videos was very hard. So like I had to use like a 8mm camcorder, plug it into the back of a desktop. I think I had to move a microphone into the speaker of the camcorder just to get the audio in. And then editing was hard because compute was like very weak back then. So it would take like hours just to make like a very simple video. Man, if I was like born several years later, like YouTube, you can edit stuff on your phone now. It's just very easy to make a video now. So things have changed quite a lot since then, probably for the better.
I know kids these days have it easy, right? You could just grab a cell phone and start a YouTube channel.
Yeah, I think it also forced me to kind of keep up to date with the technology because things were so bad, so slow. Like I always was researching what's the latest tech to like improve editing. What's the best computer to host to host videos and stuff. And it's just crazy to think about. Like back then, it was like maybe a gigabyte was a lot of hard drive space, and then like making a video was a couple hundred. So you had to be very careful of like, okay, I could only make one video on this computer. Do I want to delete my previous one or do I want to make a new one? Right. And then eventually like you got to like 20 gigabytes and now like machines here are like a couple terabytes of storage space. So it's okay.
It's amazing. It's amazing, isn't it? Awesome. Well, before the show, we were talking and you had mentioned you have much success with companies and being involved in many different roles throughout the years. How did this childhood experience play out? Like, how did it help you in some of these successes?
You know, it's funny. Like I used to work at very large companies, so like Cisco and Salesforce, and I actually made some very interesting videos for them. Like it was like action movies for the video contest, and it actually got me a lot of exposure. Like I think some of my career is attributed to some executives seeing the video in the contest and then just being like, okay, I need to like get this guy on my team. But then later I founded a company called Rocket Fuel Education. But basically it was just a company that was a bunch of videos teaching people about crypto, about investing. And then like, if you think about my childhood now, it kind of makes sense that I would end up making a lot of videos about investing. And then I write like a monthly newsletter and stuff as well. But also it keeps me up to date with the technology trends. There's always the crypto industry, but also how I got into AI was like, okay, well, if this new technology looks like it's going to be very disruptive, is there like an investing perspective? Is there maybe a job perspective I should be jumping on? And that's kind of how I ended up with where I am today.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned this. I just want to point this out to the listeners because, we do focus on AI for sales, we talk about AI business, and that's just natural in this podcast, but specifically for AI for sales, you're talking about how you stood out in your company with video.
Yeah.
Right. By creating videos and throughout the sales process, especially leveraging some of the AI technology now, is you can create videos at scale, personalized videos at scale with a lot of these AI applications and tools to help in the sales process. What could you give some advice to some of the audience about creating videos today? Any kind of like secrets or things that you've learned to do this better or quicker?
I think we are living in a very disruptive world. For example, Stable Diffusion XL just got released. You can generate extremely high resolution images, and eventually, like Runway ML, you'll be able to convert those images into videos, right? So what is happening on the generative AI side for sales and getting, in marketing is actually you can create these extremely creative, extremely visual kind of videos or images that will go viral. Essentially, if you're scrolling through your LinkedIn, you're going to catch some of these like crazy images that people have created. I think the most recent one with Midjourney was like Elon Musk fighting Mark Zuckerberg, right? If you're scrolling through your LinkedIn and you're trying to get someone to pay attention to you, everyone's going to stop on that image, right? And then see what this image is about and how it was created, right? So I think in terms of AI helping you with sales, it's time to get creative. And now the tools are in your hands to do that, right?
Amazing. Awesome. Let's talk about the industries that you've been in and some of the companies that you worked for, and now what you're doing with Codeium. Where do you see like the biggest problem in the world or the industry that AI could solve?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. Just to your previous point, like I've kind of always jumped to what was the most like exciting technology that was coming up. So I jumped into cloud computing when I was like at Salesforce, and then jumped into fintech and crypto when I was working at Tomo and then at Tonkean, which was an API company. Now with AI, I would think of it kind of as a productivity tool more so than like if you're thinking about how it can change things, because it kind of replicates a lot of what humans can do. And it right now today probably makes humans maybe 20 to 30% more efficient in what they do. But it's trending in the direction where it's going to be like 50% to 100%. And then eventually, like maybe within even like a year or two, 1,000% of what a human can do. So very repetitive, very common tasks. It can do probably all those things at 10x the efficiency, right? And then when you're talking about what it can do for humanity or for business, it's not going to break the laws of physics, right? It's not going to just like automatically cure all diseases, but it will get research done much faster. It will just increase the productivity, right, of what a human does today. So I would think of it like, what's the biggest potential for AI? It's not just like replacing humans. It's actually just making 10x humans per human, essentially, in any of these tasks.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Yeah. It's it's so interesting to see that when you look at technology over decades, and you see some of the amazing technology that's been created, and now to see AI with the effect that it has, right? It's like the personal computer just like, totally changed the world. Then you had the internet, then you had the invention of cell phones, social media, all, the app store, like all these little they seem like so small compared to what's going on right now.
And have you noticed that like the internet, when it first came out, there was not really a business model yet, right? There was a couple of years where it was just, you create a website, you post ads, and that's it, right? And then AI is kind of going through the same thing right now. It's like, oh, it's just a chat box. Who cares, right? There's not really a business model around it. And then I think it's going to go through that moment where like it's already kind of happening now, but there's going to be many, many multi-billion-dollar businesses coming out of AI very, very quickly. But I think if you look at the landscape right now of AI companies, most of them are probably not profitable, and most of them don't even have a business model. And it seems to keep repeating itself, right? Same with the App Store that you mentioned. Like when the App Store first came out, I don't think there was actually a profitable app for a while. Like there was not really a business model. And then people started realizing like, oh, subscriptions make money, and content creation and people will pay for it. Like social media, people will pay ads for it, right? So that moment still has not happened in AI, believe it or not.
Do you have some ideas of where it could go?
I think it'll start with enterprise because that's where you can measure the productivity. So if you are, our company at Codeium, we improve developer productivity, right? So we will give you measurable output of like how much time we're saving and then convert that to money. And then if you are, a tech executive or any company executive and you realize like, hey, I'm getting 20% more output out of my employees and it's only going to cost me a fraction of the price, of course I'll pay for that. And then eventually you'll see many, many AI products on the enterprise stack that are going to just boost your productivity. And the ROI is just going to be very obvious. You look at any other tech innovation in the past, it wasn't as obvious, right? If you look at, for example, Salesforce, let's say, like, oh, we're going to create you a CRM. It's going to make it easier to track your customers. It's like, what's the dollar value of that, right? Like at the time, it probably wasn't very obvious. But now with AI, it's like, there's so many tools out there to really show how much money you're saving or how much value you're creating to kind of get through these sales. And then so to answer your question, like it's going to probably start at the enterprise stack because that's where all the money and ROI is going to be. And then eventually the technology is going to keep improving where you're going to see things like, oh, this like, for example, ChatGPT might be like self-sustaining in revenue eventually, minus all the operational costs and the training costs. And then that might create something like a UBI, like, oh, we're going to give out money for free because it's like self-sufficient and operating on by itself, right? So that's like more longer term, but yeah, short term enterprise, I think is where it's at.
Awesome. I read your article on Substack, The Business of AI. Amazing article. I highly recommend everybody to go out there and look at the landscape of where companies sit in the process of where money's being made in this and what the business models are and who is really profitable, and then the certain areas of businesses where it's very questionable and unknown. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I know you went to a lot of details.
Yeah, I think the base layer is like infrastructure. So like NVIDIA is clearly making the most money out of this. They're making something that they're probably making a 10 to 20x margin on. So they create some hardware. People pay like 20 to 40 grand for it. Probably costs them like a couple $100s to make, maybe $1,000, depending if you use, getting technical here, but like NVLink or other expensive like material. But after that, it's like the cloud providers. So like Microsoft and like Google Cloud and obviously Amazon, they can host these GPUs and then make you pay for it. So that's like, they'll make the money back in a year. As long as you buy that GPU for 2 years, they're going to double their money, right? So the next level of profit is coming from the cloud providers. Now, the interesting thing is after that, you're thinking about like people who are building these models and training these models. They're spending like hundreds of millions of dollars to train these models. I think GPT-4 was probably $60 million to train, but companies like Inflection, who created Pi, they're going to spend like $800 million to build a H100 farm. So I don't know how they're going to make that money back is the thing. So foundational models, the business model there, I don't know how profitable that is going to be yet. And you're starting to see a bunch of apps that are just using ChatGPT. So you have like some use case, you use ChatGPT, and then you create some value from it, right? I think those might start out profitable, but then eventually other clones and other companies are just going to start taking over those features because it's not very defensible, right? Anybody can copy an idea that's just using ChatGPT as a wrapper. So where I think the most money is going to be made are companies that can use something open source, for example, like Stable Diffusion. And you have companies like Midjourney and Adobe Firefly that are using it like for zero incremental costs. Every like image they make for you is free, right? But you are paying a subscription on top. And then for enterprise, I think the companies that are really going to make it are people that either do the cloud or the hardware, or if they build their own foundational model and they host it and they can have a subscription fee on top of that, because then you own the whole stack. You're not paying anybody for a license. You might pay some money for training costs, but since you own the whole stack, there's no money getting lost to other players in the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how it turns out. You mentioned this in the article too. It feels like the .com era again, right?
Yeah.
It's like, there's no clear, there's all this money that's being invested in these companies that are, they're losing money. There's a lot of capital investment and it's just uncertainty of how they're going to make profits. and the valuations that the companies are getting are just incredible. How do you think it compares to .com? Is this what's happening again, or is it different in some way?
It's almost identical because you're spreading the total pie out to multiple companies, right? So like I think OpenAI is worth 29 billion. I just talked about Inflection. They're raising, I think, at a 4 or 5 billion valuation. Stability, 4 billion. Basically, all these AI companies that are in the news, like Hugging Face is also trying to raise that 4 billion. It seems to be a magical number, 4 billion. But if you think about it, like the pie of value that you're creating is only so big, right? So like how much money can you actually get from the consumer or from enterprise? And then is that getting diluted by having too many companies out there that are worth multi-billion dollars, right? So the same thing is happening as the .com era. I would say the magnitude of the product is probably big enough where there will be a lot of winners, but the rate of winners or the rate of investments that are being created, it's starting to get like saturated. So just like the .com era, I think the valuations are maybe too high, too fast, and too much, too fast. So we're probably going to see a similar moment where a lot of new companies coming out are either going to be like questioned on the valuation, or I think they'll just go down in valuation, right? Because people are going to be like, wait, your product is just like these other 12 companies. How come you're worth just as much, right? So I think just like the .com era, we'll have a similar correction period, but it won't feel as bad because I don't think there are that many publicly traded AI companies yet. I think maybe as soon as next year, we'll be seeing an IPO boom. And a lot of those will be like these private companies that have been waiting. But another batch is going to be AI companies that are just like doing nothing. There's no business model yet. They're just like training models and they're trying to put it out there on the public, right?
Yeah, it's it's amazing coming from the research and development space myself and watching these things grow. It's like all this investment really fuels the innovation, right? The ability now you have the ability to buy more compute. You have the ability to hire more talented people, and you have the ability to experiment at a greater scale, especially now that there's such wide access to these things. And I know that with Codeium, you're kind of using the same approach, right? It's like use the public to help improve the products. It's incredible to see that this is happening, and I'm curious to see what your thoughts are. I don't want to deviate too far from sales now, but I got to ask you, like, is the race to this artificial general intelligence, is this come into play? Like, how does this come into play into business?
Yeah, let me answer a few questions let me answer a few things beforehand, which is, I think when ChatGPT got released, it was such a leap forward in the technology, and it was so public as well, right? It's kind of like what we're doing with Codeium. You just release it to the public for free, make sure they understand that it's real. And then what happened is it was so advanced that a lot of the things that people didn't even know were possible were suddenly like all over Twitter and all over the news. And people were just like pretty much replacing all things that were written with ChatGPT. Like you could do tweets, you could do blog posts, you could do, essays for your college if you want. But what's happening is like to go back to your main point is like, are we going towards artificial general intelligence? There are technology and research that are happening that have like memory. And like, if I'm like, for example, creating a world of agents, which agents are like just things in AI that have a goal, right? You could create like characters that kind of remember who they are. And if you have them interact with each other, they'll remember that interaction. And then moving forward, like they have a history of like their life, right? You could in fact do that in a simulation right now. In terms of like a general intelligence where it's like better than a human, it has memory, it can do tasks that humans like have allowed it to do. Maybe they gave it access to some APIs or something. That is trending towards that direction, but it might become more structured than you think. So I think there will be agents that have memory that you give access to APIs and they do tasks for you. But in terms of like, okay, it's conscious of itself and it wants to destroy humanity, we're still pretty far from that, because I think everything will be structured leading up to that as well. But we're actually like very close to that, believe it or not. Like it's getting there.
People listening, don't get too scared. It's going to be okay. Yeah, I think whenever that comes up in my experience, that's when a lot of people start getting afraid that it's going to be beyond control. But what you're saying is it's going to be structured. This is the way we design and we build these things is there's there's constraints in place that kind of keep it contained before it gets out of control.
I think every AI, by the way, also has some goal, right? And it is up to the human that's like unleashing it to give that goal. And the goal could be bad, right? It could be like, well, figure out a way for me to get the password from Joe, right? And then just keep figuring out ways, like it might email you, it might like call you. But that's not the AI's fault, right? That's like the human that wanted to get your password. That's like the intent. So I think people maybe are undervaluing the fact that it's a productivity tool and can be used for negative purposes. And they're not thinking about those people, those bad actors, essentially. They're more thinking about like the AI itself doing those things. And I'd rather be worried about the people that are going to use it for nefarious purposes rather than the AI itself.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's an excellent point. I love the way you put that. That was awesome. It's the people that are using AI this way, that are creating these tools. That's the ones you got to watch out for, not the AI itself. Very cool. Very cool. Let's shift gears a little bit because we kind of went, more into business models and business theory. Let's jump back to Codeium and talk about sales a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about Codeium and what do you see AI selling? How do you see that looking like right now?
Yeah, there's actually two components. So just to address the AI selling itself, right now people are trying to use like ChatGPT and GPT-like features to kind of do automatic replies or automatic outbound. You could even do like transcriptions of meetings. Maybe it can transcribe this podcast, for example, and then you put it through to GPT-4 and ask like, what are the main points that Jeff said, right? And then like, just summarize this for me. I don't want to like look at the whole thing. It's too long. That's going to happen, right? I would assume in a year or so, there's going to be a podcast player that just tells you the bullet points and you don't have to even listen to the podcast. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But it is happening with sales calls, right? So we have like, dozens and dozens of sales calls every day. And it's like, okay, I can't listen to all the recordings, but I can read all the summaries, right? So we actually have AI tools to actually summarize, transcribe, give me the bullet points, give me the intent of the customer. I would say right now it's like 95% accurate. And eventually it'll trend more towards 100. But the very interesting thing is like, how much do you trust 95%, right? Would you let an AI tool that's 95% accurate just unleash to all your customers or outbound for you, right? That 1 in 20 situation where it says something wrong, it could be very costly to the organization, right? So coming from an AI company, Codeium helps developers as they code. It provides them like automatic completion, suggestions. It could even write your comments for you. We are very conscious about that. So we want to make sure that every suggestion that the AI gives you, there's a human in the loop to verify, right? But there might be sales tools that are like automatically replying to the customer. Like it emails Joe, hey, Joe, do you want to buy this phone for $1,000? And then you say like, no, I don't want to buy it. And it automatically replies, oh, how about for like 900, right? Like how much do you trust AI to do that interaction, right? You might still need salespeople today because of that like 95% thing. But eventually, as we get to 100%, you might even see sales calls and sales deals completely start from discovery and end with negotiation, all with AI, right? Like you might have two AIs communicating with each other. Like I'm trying to sell you something, I'm using an AI, and then you're using an AI to like get the best price. And then it just happens in a blink, right? We are probably going to get there like not that far from now, maybe like a year or two. Like we'll have like entire engagements back and forth just with AI.
That's powerful. Then it becomes a whose AI is better than whose AI, right? It becomes
who's a better negotiator,
better AI. Oh, it's amazing to think about it that way. So you mentioned one way that you're using AI for sales is looking at transcriptions of the calls for summaries, getting some insights from those calls. Are there other ways that you see AI helping in the sales process?
Yeah. So okay, this is actually very interesting, but we tried using like ChatGPT to do content creation. And there's a couple of reasons why you do this. Like you might want to get some, brainstorm some cool, creative things that you want to post, get some inbound maybe. You might want to do it for marketing purposes. You might want to do it for SEO, right? You want to like show up on Google. But the problem is, I think everybody kind of caught onto this strategy. So what happened is like we would put out some content and then it would just not even show up because everybody else has a very similar article, right? So everybody's kind of caught on to the point that you can like output content with ChatGPT very fast. So I think that strategy is probably marketing strategy is eventually going to dwindle. Right now, it's actually more important to have a human write content, to have like very unique thoughts. You'll notice all my blogs and I have a crypto newsletter as well. I cannot use ChatGPT. It doesn't work for that kind of content, right? So I kind of deviated from the original question, but there are ways to use ChatGPT and AI for content creation and outbound and reaching out. But I think that's going to get saturated as well. I think people are going to catch on, be able to catch it. And then like even your Google Mail is going to identify spam because it knows it was written by ChatGPT eventually, right? That's on its way. It's coming.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's interesting that I think this happens in marketing all the time. Is when there's some new marketing tactic or trick that comes out, it's just a matter of time when everybody starts using it. Then people get sensitive to it. Now they're aware that this is happening, and it loses its power or its value. Very interesting. So let's talk about Codeium. I noticed that you're using an enterprise model and then also like a consumer model to get users to use your product, and then that causes you to get some feedback so that you can improve the models, improve your application, and then when you go to to offer this to enterprises, then they now have a model that they could use where in that situation, you don't necessarily get feedback. So it's so important to get that consumer feedback to deliver a better product to the enterprise. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, how did you get there with that model? And from a sales point of view, is that, how does that play into your sales process?
So what we've discovered with AI tools is there's a lot of uncertainty, right? Number one is we already talked about like the 95% thing. Like, is the output actually good and can we trust it? But what's actually happening is security and privacy. So a lot of the stuff people like enterprise companies are putting into AI is extremely proprietary. Like people don't want to put like the source code for a rocket missile launching thing, right? For example. So like defense companies in particular really can't use ChatGPT. They're not going to ask like, oh, I had this circuit that like we've targeted to North Korea. You don't want to put something like that into these APIs that goes to Microsoft, and they might retrain on that. And it might show up in another prompt, right, or another output. So what we've realized is we need some sort of model where the AI is completely self-hosted and the data never leaves the premises. And then this way you can be very confident that any kind of AI suggestion is only coming to you and not getting like going through hoops to like get retrained on or reinforcement learning on. And you'll notice like in the news, like a lot of companies are banning ChatGPT now. And you even have Google telling their own employees not to use Bard, right? So there definitely is some sort of like privacy issue going on with these tools, these AI tools. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is like, even if you get into the enterprise, like you host a language model inside the company, then people start asking like, where did this data come from? Right. So another thing that people kind of shrug off today is like ChatGPT is probably trained on like a lot of like public data that they shouldn't have trained on. Whether it's like Reddit posts or like Quora, like these are data that they're probably getting sued by just to get the data out of the model now. Right. So one thing we're very particular about is taking out any non-permissive code from our language model. And this is very important because a lot of these other code completion tools, they just grabbed everything they could find. And then later they found out, oh crap, we're outputting copyright code as you're typing. And now there's like a class action lawsuit against like Copilot, for example. So a lot of things people just haven't thought of in AI right now that we're really starting to see surface. So like, yeah, privacy, security, uncertainty, right, of the outputs. This is all new in this industry. And I think there's going to be more and more stuff popping up that is like probably more restrictive, but then as a business in AI, like you have to figure out how to address that. Right. And I think it's a lot of work, but like you just got to go roll with the punches.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. This, I can imagine that this comes up in the sales process, pretty often, especially when selling to enterprise. Is this something that's difficult to have a conversation about?
Oh yeah, I think especially in Europe, Europe and Germany in particular have like very specific laws around like data privacy, where the data comes from, and then I can't even count how many security assessments and questionnaires of like where's the data coming from that I've had to fill out. But it can get very granular. They can get to be like, show me exactly which pieces of data you took and where it came from. And you're like, hey, this is like terabytes, if not petabytes of data that we have to like train on. Like this is going to be a very big file that we send to you if we have to prove it, right? And there are like compromises. Maybe we talk about like, okay, we don't train on specifically these types of data or this type of licenses, right? But like it's all over the place. So what I'm doing now in the sales process is like coming up with many different permutations of what kind of things they're asking for. It's like, okay, indemnification, right? Like what if code gets outputted? Who's liable for that, right? Or like, what if by coincidence there is copyright code? What do we do with that? Who's in that situation is to blame? So like all these things are like would not have come up in any other industry. But now that like we're running into this technology where a lot of vast amounts of data are being trained on and then getting outputted, it's starting to come up. And like we kind of have to like blaze the trail for this, right? Like there's not a playbook or a framework or anything that has addressed this yet.
Yeah. Especially you want to get to market with these things, right? It's like the technology's there. You kind of got to learn as you go, but at the same time, manage the risks of something happening. And then that kind of setting you back as you get a lawsuit or whatnot. It's tricky. It's almost like you need to get it out there in order to learn like what the factors are that you need to be thinking about right before you do it. So
well, I think everybody's probably watching OpenAI and then just seeing like, what are they getting sued about? And how should we avoid those mistakes, right? Because OpenAI's legal team is probably very busy right now. Can't even count the amount of lawsuits they're going through.
Right, all that investment money, man. How much did it go to a legal team? Right, they knew they needed that.
Yeah, it's probably a lot.
Yeah. Just let the big guys do it. Let them get sued, and let's learn from their mistakes and apply it.
That's a viable strategy.
Awesome, man. Well, we're wrapping up towards the end of the episode here. I just wanted to get maybe some final thoughts about AI, what you see happening maybe for the next year.
Yeah, I think in the next year, all these companies that are building AI products are just going to focus on building the best models. I think it started with creating the biggest, baddest model possible. Now it's getting more towards like more purpose-driven models, like getting more relevant data, fine-tuning it with the right amount of information to make it very, very specific and very good at what its purpose is supposed to be, right? In terms of like how humans use AI, I think right now it's probably, I told you, like 20 to 30% kind of improvements on like very repetitive tasks. However, like I think that number is going to increase throughout the year. I think by the end of the year, it might even be like 50% improvements to like these very common tasks around enterprise and even personal life. And the one thing that's going to happen is like, there's some degree of uncertainty with like hallucinations and what's going to come up, but there's also a lot of uncertainty around the legal ramifications, right? I don't know what kind of regulatory frameworks are going to come out of the EU, for example. The European Union is like really aggressive on regulating AI right now. So in the next year, we're going to see a mix of this, like models being built that are very, very good at what they're doing, and a lot of pushback in terms of regulation. And probably we'll see a major leak or a major thing that happens that's going to make AI look bad, because those are going to get the most press. And you're going to have this battle between the AI and the like perception of AI essentially as it improves productivity.
Wow. Good insights. Awesome. Let the audience know, how do they find out more about Codeium, or if they need to, if you're interested in getting in touch with you or things that they want to learn, tell them how they can learn more from you.
Yeah, you can go to our website, Codeium.com. We're actually Codeium with an E, so CODEIUM.com. I actually have a Twitter, Jeff Wang Crypto. So that's my handle. You can always find me there. You could always DM me anytime. So it was great to be on this podcast.
Awesome. Great to have you here. Thank you, Jeff, for being on the show. And I loved hearing about it. Excellent. Great insights. Great to have you here. Thank you.
Awesome. It was fun. Thank you.
All right. And I'm Joe Papa again. And if you'd like to learn more about AI, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm Mr. Joe Papa, JoePapa. And you could also find more about AI training at trueversity.com. Thanks again, Jeff. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.
Hey, you made it this far in your AI for sales journey. Want to augment your sales growth? First, leave us a review and then visit www.scalex.ai to claim your free strategy session today.